Hello guys, welcome back to NHL Rumor Roundup, the show where we discuss the biggest rumors from across the NHL. Today we're going to be discussing the latest on Mitch Marner, Jesse Puljujarvi, the Minnesota Wild and their GM search, and last but not least, the Calgary Flames. Now, over the past few days, we've seen a bunch of new rumors spreading across the NHL. But what is the latest rumors and information on Mitch Marner, Jesse Puljujarvi, the Minnesota Wild, and the Calgary Flames? Watch till the end to find out. Now, while we've seen a bunch of new information and rumors on players that we haven't really discussed in the past, the one main constant has been Mitch Marner, and he has a lot of new information surrounding his name. Now, first and foremost, a couple of days ago we also learned that the whole situation in the RFA class is really surrounding Mitch Marner. We heard really good reports that Mitch Marner, if he were to sign, would create a kind of domino effect when it came to a lot of the RFA wingers especially. A lot of those wingers, guys like Patrick Laine, Kyle Connor, Matthew Chuck, Brock Besser, are waiting on him to get that final decision and to ultimately set the market for RFAs right now. Now, for one, it does show how important this Marner negotiations is when it comes to the years, when it comes to the money on the contract. It affects a lot of other players too. And secondly, the players do feel the same. They want to wait for that contract to get done to really set the market when it comes to their standards. And again, last year we saw one William Nylander situation going into December as an unsigned RFA, but this next season we could see like 5. It could really be that crazy, especially Mitch Marner is unsigned going into training camp. But it might go into the season as he's still unsigned, which with the William Nylander situation, we all saw how that can really affect a player, especially physically. But when it comes to Mitch Marner, when it comes to his contract negotiations, James Myrtle had a big piece on him. And when it comes to James Myrtle, especially on the Maple Leafs, he is usually very credible, so I will take his word for it. But he ended up saying the Toronto Maple Leafs ended up giving him a $10 million plus deal for 8 years. That Mitch Marner didn't decline that, but rather countered an offer with a bridge deal. Now, James Myrtle writes that the counteroffer that Mitch Marner gave the Toronto Maple Leafs was a bridge deal. 3 years on the contract at $10 million flat. It's obvious right now that Mitch Marner does not want to sign a long-term deal, and 8 years is obviously the most they can go. So when it comes to Toronto, if they really want to get this deal done, it might have to be a 3 or 4 year deal. But even at 4 years, I don't think Toronto wants to even touch that. That's when Matthews goes off. I think that might also be when Nylander goes off his contract. So to have all 3 coming in the same year, I think will be a disaster for them. And I think Mitch Marner also knows that. If he goes to 3 years, I think that would definitely work for him and the Toronto Maple Leafs. More so for Mitch Marner especially, but for Toronto getting about $10 million is still a little bit steep. And you definitely start to notice the divide between both Toronto and the Mitch Marner camp. Marner wanting that 3-year deal, the Toronto Maple Leafs wanting that 8-year deal. There's obviously a big difference there. And that's why I think this may go into the training camp for the very least. It could go into the season. I don't think Mitch Marner wants that. I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs want that. I don't think the Leafs fans want that either. But I think it is pretty likely right now, especially with the way things are looking right now. Now, the next player we'll mention in today's Rumor Roundup is now focused on Jesse Puljujarvi and his recent trade discussions that have gotten very juicy. Now, Jesse Puljujarvi recently took part in a hometown charity game in his hometown in Finland. After the fact, he had some few quotes that were very interesting. For the most part, when it comes to Jesse Puljujarvi, especially in some of the trade rumors we've seen in the past couple of months, it's mostly been his trade agents saying all this stuff and putting the rumors out there. But we finally got word of what Jesse Puljujarvi wants, and he gave us some pretty big drama. Now, Jesse Puljujarvi had this to say about his future with the Edmonton Oilers, or I guess lack thereof. He said, "I want a new start with some other team. Playing in North America is still my goal. I will stay in ULU until I have a contract. I will find a place to play somewhere else." And that is big news. Again, when it comes to Jesse Puljujarvi, we always knew that he requested a trade. He wanted to play on some other team. But right now, he's pretty much demanding that he's off the Edmonton Oilers, or he's just going to stay with the Finnish team in ULU. He's going to play in the league out of the KHL. Whatever has to be done. Jesse Puljujarvi does not want with the Edmonton Oilers right now, and for me, I can't really blame him. And honestly, just from a development standpoint, the KHL Liga would be so much better than the Edmonton Oilers right now. And even though they have changed management, I don't really care. Just from Edmonton pure alone, Jesse Puljujarvi does not want anything to do with them right now. And again, to the KHL, the Liga, I think would be a decent route for him to go. He might be able to prove himself once again there. And then again, once the Edmonton Oilers don't have his rights, he can sign somewhere else, go on a prove-it deal, and then pretty good in the NHL, which I think he can be if he's actually developed right. With the Edmonton Oilers and all they've done with him the past couple of years, I don't have any faith that they're going to be able to do that. And with Jesse Puljujarvi, who has such a great character, such a fantastic skill set, if he's used right, the Edmonton Oilers pretty much squashed that in the ground, and right now will be a much better fit on a different NHL team. And when it comes to Jesse Puljujarvi, his trade value is at an all-time low. The Edmonton Oilers basically have to trade him, or else he's going to a team in the league or the KHL. So, for a team that maybe trades a couple of picks for him, it could be a no-brainer at that point. He's a former 4th overall pick, and the NHL hasn't been that bad. So even as a fourth liner, third liner possibly, I think he'd be a good depth option. A cheap one at that, especially when it comes to trading. And I am 100% totally biased because I love Jesse Puljujarvi. I want to see him succeed in the NHL and be a solid NHL player. But I like the Edmonton Oilers, and it won't happen there. It just won't even work whatsoever. And Jesse Puljujarvi making that right move, I think, is good. Him going out of Edmonton, I think, will be great for his career, not just now, but in the future. Now, next up, we're going to be focusing on the Minnesota Wild in today's Rumor Roundup and their whole new GM search. Now, the Minnesota Wild obviously fired Paul Fenton a few days back. The whole chaos that spilled out of that was absolutely astounding. But when it comes to the Minnesota Wild, they're trying to keep all that chaos contained and trying to find a new GM to fill Paul Fenton's shoes, which were not good shoes to begin with. Now, I guess good news and technically bad news for Minnesota Wild fans. They're really progressing when it comes to GM searches, but maybe not for the right GMs. Now, the two guys that Minnesota has interviewed, at least up to this point right now, have been Ron Hextall and Peter Chiarelli. One name who I think is a perfect fit for the Minnesota Wild, and the other is Peter Chiarelli. Now, I am all for giving second chances out, but for the Minnesota Wild to give a second chance to Peter Chiarelli, I don't think that's the move, Minnesota, and I think Minnesota Wild fans will agree. But Ron Hextall is a very interesting fit. Now, obviously, those aren't the two main candidates there. They aren't the finalists whatsoever. They still have other guys to interview. But those two guys are the first ones, which I think is intriguing. Ron Hextall was the first guy to get met with, which I think is a fantastic fit for the Minnesota Wild. Now, their owner, Leopold, said they wanted to make the playoffs, but Ron Hextall isn't that GM. But for the Minnesota Wild, a team that is in desperate need of a rebuild right now, he would be the perfect fit. In Philadelphia, when they kind of needed a rebuild / retool, he got a ton of fantastic prospects in their system and built themselves one of the best cores in the AHL we've seen in the past 5 years. I think he could do the same with the Minnesota Wild, especially given that opportunity. Now, to be fair, if the Minnesota Wild did end up signing Chiarelli as their GM, I don't think he'd be nearly as bad as he would be with the Edmonton Oilers. I think there's some lessons learned that he definitely took in, but when it comes to Peter Chiarelli being on Minnesota, I think the best he would be is just a meh NHL GM. I think for the Minnesota Wild, they've had too much mediocrity to just settle for that at the best. But Ron Hextall going in there, a guy that can change that franchise, and in the better, a guy that can rebuild a franchise, and for the Minnesota Wild, a team that's been stuck in that mediocrity, I think getting out of that and getting on that full rebuild should be in their full interest. Now, Michael Russo of The Athletic did end up saying again that the Minnesota Wild do want to get this GM done and signed before the September 9th deadline, and just before September in general. Before training camps, before prospect camps come up and start going along, they want to get that GM spot settled. So in the next month, in this August, we'll see it definitely come along. A lot more guys get interviewed, and a lot more information end up coming out. And moving on to the next team we'll discuss in today's Rumor Roundup, I have the Calgary Flames, their interesting trade situation. Now, due to the Matthew Tkachuk situation and negotiations there, Calgary is a little bit strained when it comes to cap, and they might be looking to make a couple of moves and trade a couple of guys to get some more room. Now, Kent Wilson of The Athletic ends up suggesting one player on Calgary that is more of a sure bet to be traded in this offseason. That player being Michael Frolik. Now, Michael Frolik is very interesting because he can be a very solid middle six guy if you did give him an opportunity. He has a physical presence, has some goal scoring, and just is a point getter too. He has an offense, and he has brain that so far. And I think for an NHL team that hasn't been able to get that free agent that they really did want, especially on the offensive side, it could be very enticing to get him on a one-year deal again. He has a one-year deal at $4.3 million. Not too expensive, but also not cheap either. Now, while Matthew Tkachuk has gone out and said that he wants to stay in Calgary and that he will sign before training camp, we don't know exactly what that cap might be, and he might still end up signing with Calgary, but Calgary might have to make a move or two to get that done. You also have Andrew Mangiapane, who is an RFA too. He might take a couple million of that cap. Right now, Calgary has $7.75 million in cap, which for Matthew Tkachuk alone might be enough, but Mangiapane obviously being factored in, it might not be enough to get him there. Michael Frolik, though, with 1 year at 4.3, if you get that contract off the books, you'd be completely fine. And yes, he'd be great to have, but he's more of a luxury rather than a necessity. Now for the Calgary Flames, while they might be trading players, they might want to bring players in too. And we got a recent report by Jim Matheson, and yes, he is a huge meme on Twitter, but does have some sources. He ended up saying that the Calgary Flames were very interested on Edmonton Oilers D Alex Petrovic. I think that could be a decent fit. And again, for Calgary, they lost a couple of depth guys. They bought out Michael Stone. They could use some more depth defense. Petrovic, yes, is pretty expensive, but would be decent, possibly in that top 6. For the Calgary Flames, they have some work to do. Again, not getting past the first round of last year's playoffs has a massive cloud around this next season for them. Calgary, again, needs to go up to expectations and try to do well. Now, Cam Talbot as their probably starter, you're going to want to have to do a lot of big moves. And for Calgary, again, getting Matthew Tkachuk signed should be the #1 priority, even though it is the obvious move right about now. But of course, with today's Rumor Roundup, I need to hear your guys' thoughts down those comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about the rumors we discussed in today's video? What do you think about the latest on Mitch Marner, Jesse Puljujarvi, the Minnesota Wild, and the Calgary Flames? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this playlist right here to get my complete coverage on all my NHL trade rumor videos and trade rumor talk. But that'll be it for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. And again, comment down below your thoughts on the rumors we discussed in today's video. What do you think about the Marner situation, the Jesse Puljujarvi situation, and more? And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.